This is BBC Two with a revealing portrait of our nation on film.
This stuff is tin. Cornish tin. Mined in the Silicon Valley of its day, tin was a vital ingredient for the Industrial Revolution.
As you go deeper, it gets hotter, and the work is hard and arduous. You know, being a miner is not a soft job. It's a tough job, and it's dangerous.
Using rare archive footage, this programme tells of close camaraderie forged in pitiless labour and frequent tragedy. The story of the decline and death of Britain's oldest industry. Atlantic rollers breaking on granite cliffs. It's the stuff of 1 million picture postcards. But long before the tourists came, Cornwall had a harsher economy. Granite is where you find tin, but the rock doesn't give up its treasure without a fight. At Levant, as at many other mines, more often than not, the miners came off worst. October the 20th, 1919. These are the earliest moving images of tin mining. They show the aftermath of the Levant mine disaster, when a lift bringing 100 men to the surface collapsed. "50 years later, John James, who should have been in that lift, recalled his own narrow escape.
And I was about to step in. He said, "Don't step in, boy. There's something wrong." And she made a quiver, you know, and I dodged back and under, like, and that was that. Down she goes. Of course, what happened, see, the main pin on the top broke, see. And then the rod on the way down broke in half. That's what done the damage. That went right through, see, down to the 60 level. Took everything with it.
29-year-old William John Murley was among those who died. His wife was expecting their third child at the time.
He'd gone to the mine, early shift. She was waiting for him to come home, trying to get the housework finished and probably a meal prepared, knowing Gran. And then I think 2 neighbours and someone from the mine came to tell her the bad news. I think it affected her till the day she died. Not in a bitter way, but it was obvious to me that they were very devoted, and she was only a young woman at 26. I mean, they were in love, weren't they? I mean, she wasn't an old woman then. She had 2 small children with a young husband. Life was for living, and all of a sudden it was stopped.
31 men died at Levant. It was one of Cornwall's worst mining disasters. Despite claims that the mine had been neglected by greedy owners, an official inquiry decided no one was to blame, and the mine owners escaped prosecution. The dilapidated condition of the Levant mine was typical of the times. Between the wars, production slumped to an all-time low, and owners were unwilling to invest. There was less risk of explosion than in a coal mine, because there was no combustible gas. But in every other way, the job was more dangerous. 180 men from the St. Just district were killed in accidents in the 70 years leading up to World War I. But miners' phthisis, or silicosis, accounted for thousands more. 6 out of 10 miners went to their graves with lung diseases. Anne Ellsworth, even as a young girl, was aware of the risks her father took.
Well, I didn't like Dad going over there and going underground. And I suppose I must have heard or known then how ill people can get. And I've locked the door many a time and took the key to bed with me so I shouldn't go out early. But because that Geaver's phthisis, or miner's phthisis, it's an awful thing. See a man failing in front of your very eyes, going thin, because they did go thin, very thin. When my dad died, he had enough lung to cover an old-fashioned thruppenny bit.
There was another killer, arsenic. It's a byproduct of tin mining. In the late 19th century, this one mine in the Tamar Valley supplied half the world's needs. This extraordinary film from the 1930s shows the pathetic precautions the miners took. These men are shoveling arsenic. It's an accumulative poison. A little bit today, a little bit tomorrow, eventually adds up to an agonising death.
Tastes sweet when you get arsenic in your mouth, when the water runs into your mouth if you're drilling up or if you're working and the water's coming down over your face, then arsenic and copper do taste quite sweet. Certainly arsenic is poisonous, and once it's refined it becomes more dangerous than when it's in the ground, in the ore. And a lot of the men who worked around the arsenic treatment plant at Crofty often did seem to have sore skin, etc. But whether that was due to that or something else, I've absolutely no idea.
By the 1930s, the industry was hanging on by its fingernails, looking back to its glory days. A century before, 40,000 men had worked 300 mines. They brought pride and prosperity to Cornwall, supplied half the world's tin, as well as copper and other byproducts. The first signs of the crash came in the 1870s, when new deposits, cheaper and easier to extract, were found in South America. Thousands of Cornish miners went abroad to the new workings. The industry spiralled into decline. The unlikely saviour was Mr. Hitler.
During a 3-day tour of towns and cities in the West Country, the King and Queen covered nearly 1,000 miles in the course of their visits to many centres of war activity. At Redruth, Cornwall, a tin mine now fully engaged making good our tin losses abroad is of particular interest to their Majesties.
The King and Queen's visit was recognition of the miners' massive contribution to the war effort. Tin made planes, tanks and munitions. The war had taken foreign sources out of the equation. The problem now was manpower. Many miners, coal as well as tin, had volunteered for the forces. To make up the shortfall, Ernest Bevan, Minister of Labour, sent 1 in 10 of all conscripts to work in the mines. Bob Butcher was one of these Bevan boys. He hated it.
It's very frightening down there at times. I think the lowest level I went was 340 fathom, and you get down bottom, and as they drop, and as you're like this when the cage stops. You know, in time you get used to it, but it's frightening. And I always remember we were putting up what they call a raise. From one level to the other, you drill up, say, and then you go up on ladders. And I worked with a chap from Plymouth. I always remember him, called Percy Garrett. And I think that was the worst day's work ever I had in my life. What a terrible place to be.
Women were recruited too. Here seen at the Giva mine, separating out the ore on the picking belt. There was nothing new about women working in the industry. Heavy work too, nothing dainty. In the 19th century, bal maidens, bal is the Cornish word for mine, had swung sledgehammers like hard labour convicts. The wartime boom in the industry and the continued high price of tin after the war brought what looked like a renaissance for Cornish tin mining. Small-time entrepreneurs found it profitable to open long-abandoned workings, like the old Lockett mine. And they paid top wages, encouraging farm workers like Pop Curtis to try their luck underground.
Used to work over the Morton farm here, and I said to the boss, I said, I'm going to go out and look at mining work. I can get a lot more money out there. Because I think then I was only getting about 25 shillings a week, something like that. Well, I went out there, and I was working two shifts for earning about £18 a week. I know there was hard graft, a lot of hard graft, but you earned the money, you know. I used to climb the chutes, if anybody had a chute hung up, and I used to take a stick of dynamite and fuse and cat and go up and put it in between the stones and light the fuse and get out as fast as I could go. And then they always nicknamed me Pop. See, they say, well, you go up and give him a pop. And that's how I got my nickname.
While the boom lasted, tin fever even sent hopeful prospectors into the Cornish hills. They used methods ancient, modern, and downright bizarre. Clifford Hugo was one of the hopefuls, willing to seek his fortune with one of the prospecting companies.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it because I felt like I was trying to find something, you know, that was very hard to find, and they'd give me this fantastic diamond drilling machine, and you had a winch to pull up the cores and everything with.
Few of the prospectors got lucky, the usual problem being that tin deposits are easy to find, but unprofitable to mine.
We went in about 14, 15 feet, and then it started to dip into the floor, and, well, that was beyond us then because you was going down below sea level, and you'd be wasting your time.
Nevertheless, 3 mines did establish themselves alongside Giver and South Crofty, the doughty survivors from the 19th century. With money pouring in from the international markets, owners were at last prepared to fund the modernisations that had been overdue at the 2 old mines for 100 years.
The board wanted to increase production. They asked me to go to London and they said, Gerald, oh boy, how much do you think you can increase production by? So I said, we can double it, sir. So he said, all right. He said, we will give you the money to put up a new and bigger and stronger headgear, a bigger winder to pull more ore, 6 tons at a time instead of 2 tons at a time. We'll give you a new mill, like the one that's already there, so you can double production. We'll give you a new heavy media separation plant. And all this lot cost about £4.5 million.
And the price of tin kept rising, eventually hitting £8,000 a tonne, 20 times its wartime level. The post-war affluent society had bred a new demand for tin: washing machines, cars, electronics, and spacecraft. Again, manpower was a problem. The 60s affluence that had fuelled demand for tin was a product of full employment. The Cornish were more aware than anyone that there were cushier ways to make a living.
Over the past 3 years, we have been conducting a very extensive advertising campaign in order to attract miners to this mine.
We even advertised up country in the coalfields. You know, £50, I think the headline in the paper was £50 jobs go a-begging in Cornwall. Of course, £50 is a lot of money in those days. They came down, they stayed a little while, and they went back. They didn't like it down this way. I don't know why. Yeah, some miners there.
2 Welsh blokes came down when we was there, and they couldn't handle it. It was because they're up there. You can just rip the coal out, like, you know. I know they have the same dangers as what we have there, but the actual work, you know, it's so much harder in a tin mine.
Despite the modernisations, at the dawn of the space age, conditions underground were much the same as 100 years before.
There was no induction, no training as such, no safety as such. It was down to the men you were working with to actually explain what you should and shouldn't do. It was very, very hot, very humid. We worked stripped to the waist, and we didn't have proper earmuffs or earplugs, so we just basically had a headache. I had to put cotton wool in my ears, but it wasn't very effective. But a lot of them, they thought that was quite sissy to put cotton wool in your ears. You just basically accepted. A lot of the older miners accepted. They had a headache, and they eventually went deaf.
The upper levels at Giver would be like working in a rainstorm. There's cold water running on you, and you're up to your knees in mud and slush water. Your boots get full up, and then you're soaking wet. As you go lower down in Giver, when you get down to from 15 down to 19 level, is red hot.
The hottest place I worked in was number 4 on 380 on the east side of the mine, with a man called Fred Mounsey. And we took the temperature there with an ordinary thermometer at 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was almost 100% of humidity. It was absolutely incredibly hot. And when we sat down to have something to eat, we would empty our Wellingtons from sweat, and there'd be half a pint in each of them. Yeah, that quite literally was what happened. People emptied the sweat out of their Wellingtons.
It's difficult at times to do your work, but you knew that if you didn't get stuck in, we never earned no money. That was the downside of working in there, but it was something that you accepted. You was a miner, and you accepted it. If you didn't like it, then you go on surface and work on the farm, perhaps. But we all loved it, and once you start mining, you never finish.
Short of local recruits, the owners began to hire immigrants, Poles and Italians mostly. Adjusting to the new way of life wasn't always easy.
1955, I started in Giver. I was terrified. God, I was scared stiff, shaken with the fright I was, you know. I was terrified of the mine, I was terrified of the cage, it can't go up and down, my ear can't hear anything. I was terrified because I was so strange. It was a small village, but it was so strange. People talk, you don't understand what they said. And it was so strange because I missed my girlfriend in Italy, which I was in love, and then you come in a young man in here, go work in the mine, everything complete, terrified.
Remarkably, these close-knit communities accepted the foreign workers. Mike soon forgot his girl in Italy. He and his brother married two St. Just sisters, and like many of their compatriots, made Cornwall their home. New working practices cut the number of accidents and deaths dramatically. Silicosis was less of a danger since the introduction of water into the drilling process to dampen down the dust. All the same, many miners preferred to drill dry. It was quicker and earned them more money.
If you drill without water, and everybody has done that at some time, the dust produced is amazing. I remember once I drilled a couple of holes just to put some pegs in the wall, and we just drilled two 2-foot deep holes, and there was no water available, so we used the machine without the water, and the dust was impenetrable. It really was astonishing. So what it must have been like before they had water to dampen it down, I can imagine it must be horrific.
The harsh life underground forged close bonds.
I had a very good friend of mine got killed at Giver, and he was only a young boy. And when someone like that happens, it's a piece of you gone as well. I don't think people on the surface realise how dangerous the job could be, but you had a lovely bunch of men to work with. If anybody got into any difficulty, any problems, all the miners would come to and give you a hand. The camaraderie with the miners is something that will never ever be replaced in my life. Never.
This camaraderie was much in evidence when these miners were filmed underground at South Crofty, Christmas 1963.
With the Cornish, when they sing, it always seems to be spontaneous. So you can't go into a pub and say, come on, let's have a sing-song. Someone starts singing and somebody else joins in, and within a minute or two, maybe 20 or 30 men singing, and they can sing, the Cornish. They are good.
The work defined you. Your dad was a miner, your granddad. Thousands of years of continuity and community. This BBC footage was shot in 1980.
Everybody gathered in St. Just for Midsummer Day. All the young girls would have new dresses, etc. And there would be big parades and banners, and if you were going to have a new dress for the summer, you wouldn't wear it until midsummer. You would save it until midsummer. And all the children looked forward to it. Very traditional, I mean, sports and tea treat buns and this sort of thing. This happened since back in the last century.
The Midsummer's Day festival always finished with a bonfire on Chapel Carn Brae, a tradition as old as tin mining itself, possibly dating back to the Bronze Age.
I don't know enough about Cornish folklore, if you like, or pagan folklore, which is really where it originates. It's not a recent thing. It's something that's been going on for many, many years. Tin mining was a traditional industry. These midsummer celebrations were a tradition of the area. It's a highlight of the Cornish calendar, if you like. These are ancient celebrations and people like to keep them going.
But Cornwall's future lay with tourism rather than tin. Little did those celebrating here realise that their timeless traditions wouldn't last forever. In 1980, their industry was so successful it merited another royal visit. The Queen opened a new shaft at Giever Mine.
It was a privilege and an honour to have the Queen visit the mine. It was also a fairly unique visit in the fact that she was actually going underground at the mine, which is fairly rare on royal visits, and also an endorsement of the future of the mine. It was our job to drive the locomotives that pulled the man-riding cars to take the royal party into the Levant workings. She was in our environment. I think she was a bit unsure of not unsure of where she was, but of the conditions and being, she was 1,800 feet underground, which was probably a very new experience for her.
But the industry was living on borrowed time. For years, tin producers buying and selling on the London Metal Exchange had kept its price artificially high. But Brazil and China flooded the market with cheap tin. On October the 25th, 1985, the price crashed from more than £8,000 per tonne to just over £3,000. It was bedlam. 300 miles away from the city traders, the Giever miners felt the seismic shock of the great crash.
No one knew it would be such a drastic drop at the time. And we thought, obviously, that the price would drop, but not so much as it dropped at once. We thought it would be a gradual decline of the price. We was at discussions with management, Mr. Ken Gilbert at the time. He was the manager. And we put forward a proposal that we work 9 hours a day, but still only receive 8 hours pay. And therefore that would give us an extra hour's work a day and we could drill more footage. Everybody put in that little bit extra effort to try and keep our heads above water.
They went to London to protest, hoping the Thatcher government would shore up their industry with a £20 million loan.
We all went up on the train up to London, not just Giever, but miners from Crofty, Wheel Jane, Wellington, all went up there, marched from Fleet Street down to the Houses of Parliament, lobbying MPs in the Houses of Parliament. It was quite an experience.
DTI officials came down to Cornwall to visit Giever Mine.
We had members of the government down to DTI, I should say. And I actually shook the man's hand and he said, well, I see all the work you're doing and I can't see no reason why that the government won't invest the money in your mine. And we thought, well, we're going to be reasonably safe now. We're going to get some money from the government. Then I think it was a couple of months later after that. It was the Black Friday when I come up from underground. I was told by a reporter, how do you feel about the mine shutting?
One, I'm sad that Giever is having to shut. And the second one, I'm very mad. As a matter of fact, I'm friggin' teasing. Because the blokes here have worked hard over the last 5 months. We've been working 9 hours a day, and we've worked 9 hours on our last day. And all Mr. Gilbert, that's our chief over there, he's asked for £20 million over the next 10 years. And so far, all we got from her up there, Maggie Thatcher, wait and see, wait and see. It's wrong. There's men here, there's families here that are going to lose out. When the last Cornishman came out of Giever, and if that is the last, she ought to be drawn and quartered and dropped down that shaft. That's my opinion of her, pal.
I suppose I'm older and wiser now. Obviously, I was really upset. I was really annoyed at the time, really let down by people that we was promised the money, and it was only I'm saying only an interest-free loan, but Giever was prepared to pay the money back. That's the annoying part.
Giever lay idle, awaiting a reprieve. It never came. In desperation, Cornwall's 1,500 miners went on the march again, this time through the streets of Camborne, once the industry's heartland, to protest against a government they felt had betrayed them.
You need more in our economy than just tourism, ice cream and deck chairs. Our mining industry is not a figment of the last decade or the last 2 decades. It has occupied Cornishmen, it has produced wealth for this century, the previous century, probably for the last 2,000 years. And what we're asking the government of the day to do is to recognise that great contribution that we've made to the wealth of Great Britain. And in this great time of trial and tribulation to come to our assistance. That's what we're seeking, that's what we're asking our government to do.
The government gave loans to Wheel Jane in South Crofty, Cornwall's 2 other surviving mines, but deemed Geever a lost cause. John Phillips stayed on at Geever for a while as part of a small care and maintenance team.
It was like a ghost mine. Myself and Jeremy Green, he was my mine captain, we had to go down and bring up all the machines from the stopes and the ends and clean everything out. And it was the worst day's work that I had to do it in my mining career.
Nobody ever believed it would close. It was always this, everybody hang on to this belief, something will happen, it'll be okay, you know, it'll continue. A fair number went away short term, some long term. Some retired early, some went into alternative jobs. I mean, several actually set up small businesses of their own. Some succeeded, some failed. A lot of personal problems, strain on marriages, strain on relationships, on families, strain on the children as well. And by so many families, you're not talking about 1 or 2 families, so many families.
You got the Bowler Hat Brigade up in London, they don't give a bugger for we down here. No. They're lining their pockets, they ain't worried about we. It's that what they want for Cornwall is holiday centre and they're going to get it.
John took his skills to the Yorkshire coalfields, but a couple of years later the government pulled the plug on them too. Returning to Cornwall, he found the entire industry was dying on its feet. The 2 remaining mines struggled on for a few more years. Wheel Jane closed in 1991, South Crofty in 1998. One South Crofty worker summed up the feelings of his colleagues on their last day underground.
You're here today filming me and thinking, who's that old bugger? It doesn't matter. This mine shouldn't be shut today because it should be kept going now. Government put subsidies everybody else, subsidize the farmers. Why not subsidize this? The last tin mine